Good afternoon, good evening, everybody, depending on where you are in this great country. And thank you for taking time out of your very, very busy days to join me, Sheila Gunn Reid, and my friend Adam Sos, based in Calgary, as we await the announcement of the results of Jason Kenney's leadership review vote. Adam, how's it going?
Oh, it's going good. It's going good. It looks like we're actually going to be somewhat on time now. Hopefully, I'm not jinxing that with this tonight, but very much looking forward to this. This result we're about to see here tonight is very much going to shape the political discourse for the next year or so, leading up until the next election at the very least. So, very sort of important to be here covering this. I think very happy to be joining you doing it.
Yeah, the party says that we should be able to expect results in about 12 minutes, around 5:30 Mountain Time. But just so people understand what's happening here, Jason Kenney is facing a leadership review. 3 years, 4 years after uniting the remains of the Progressive Conservative Party with the Wild Rose Party here in Alberta. So he united the right, the United Conservative Party. And people were expecting him to govern as very true blue. We thought, I think it's, I'm not saying anything crazy here, but people thought they were going to get themselves a little bit of a Stephen Harper here. And that's not at all what we got, because then the pandemic struck, and then Jason Kenney acted more like a Doug Ford conservative than an
Mhm.
actual conservative who had built a history of supporting civil rights and civil liberties, who had made religious freedom the cornerstone of his work when he was in the federal government. He became the premier who was locking down churches, arresting multiple pastors, and not just holding them like catch and release for weeks and weeks at a time. Um, it, we didn't really see the Jason Kenney we thought we were going to see. And this is now a chance for members of the United Conservative Party to tell Jason Kenney what they thought of his leadership. But I think he ragged the puck a little bit, and I'll get your advice here, Adam. I think he
Mhm.
ragged the puck long enough so that people who were thinking, I'm a conservative, but I'm not so sure Jason Kenney is anymore. We need to
Mhm.
change leadership if we plan to beat Rachel Notley, who's sniffing around again, the leader of the NDP, who put Albertans through 4 years of hell. She was like a
Yeah.
scarecrow for investment. But I think he regged the puck long enough that it might go in his favor, where people are saying, look, we don't even have time to get a new guy in place, to get people to know the new guy, to campaign with the new guy, to take on the NDP, and the NDP has all the backing of the unions. But what do you think?
Yeah, and I mean, I think I agree with you. First off, I do want to say though, if the results do come up, we are watching the live stream here. Just so you're in case you're worried about missing it, we're going to jump to that right away, whatever we're in the middle of.
Cut
So
us.
just in case
Yeah.
you're worried, also want to encourage you, whatever platform you're on, to engage with us in chats, whatever platform you're on. Most of those, YouTube aside, have an opportunity for you to support the independent journalism that we do. But also, we really want to have a conversation with you more than ever on this topic. What do you think is going to happen if there's a leadership review? Who do you think is a person who can lead this province moving forward? We want to get into all of that, whether you're in Alberta, across the country. Those are conversations we want to have with you. So do consider making one of those chats. It's an excellent way. You give a buck, a couple bucks, $100, whatever you can do. It supports this independent journalism. It supports us covering, doing streams like this, and getting out there telling the other side of the story. So make sure to engage in that. But yeah, I do think that there is definitely some, and we can talk about some of the sort of suggested or maybe accused strategies being implemented by Jason Kenney leading up to this, a number of which very much echoes of the RCMP investigation into the initial leadership bid, which there are still questions revolving around that. But definitely this idea of taking a month to complete this process, adding a bunch of complications and sort of loopholes to the process, getting us closer and closer to that provincial election, and without a clear sort of strong challenging frontrunner. Obviously, we're hearing names like Brian Jean, Danielle Smith, familiar names from the past, but very often those are people, Danielle Smith has done a lot of incredible journalism, very much beloved for that work, but when you talk about her in the political field, people often immediately
Baggage.
jump to, yeah, or floor crosser. You hear those things despite all the other great work she's done. That is often what comes up. Brian Jean also lost. There's debates as to whether that was fair or not, and that remains to be seen based on this investigation, but he's the guy that Jason Kenney already beat. There's not a guy or gal waiting who are the clear up and coming voice. So I think for many people, their sentiment for this, maybe we're a year away. Can you only imagine how much? And for all the criticism we've fair criticism, and I think just honest, tough journalism we've directed towards Jason Kenney, how much worse would Rachel Notley have been? And who's most likely to win moving forward? That's another question entirely. But in some people's mind, who maybe aren't as concerned about the charter right stuff, who aren't as concerned about some of those other infractions, in their minds, and we talked at the UCP AGM, we had conversations like this, in their minds, well, he was okay on the other issues and he kind of dropped the ball on this one issue. For some people, dropping that ball in freedom, I think for you and I, it's pretty significant. Other people, they're more so concerned with economics. What's your take on this?
Yeah. Before I get too far again into the weeds, if you want to interact with us, Rumble Rant is the paid chat there. Super U Shout, that's their paid chat, and an Odyssey hyper chat. So you want to interact with us, send us there, and let us know what you think is going to shake out today, because I think Jason Kenney set the bar at 50% plus one to survive the leadership review. And just for context, beloved Premier Ralph Klein, in 2006, after paying down our debt and fighting fiercely for Albertans and staring down the public sector unions in a way we've never seen a premier do since. Yeah. He received 55% of the support of the party from his leadership review. And within days of that vote coming in, he announced he would resign as premier and as the party leader by September 2006. So for Ralph Klein, beloved, successful, highly popular, he said 55% is just not enough of the party's confidence in him, especially if you want to maintain a united party. And Jason Kenney is in a much different situation. He's got a party that's willing to say, you know what? We tried unity. I'm going to go back to my Wild Rose corner. You guys can go be red Tories over there, and we'll just fight this out in the legislature again. Now that bodes well for Rachel Notley, unless, in the next election, the two conservative parties form some sort of coalition. But she's sniffing around, and I think you're right. There are a lot of people are saying, Jason Kenney let us down, 100%. He locked up pastors, 100%. Closed our businesses. Yep. He said, I don't even know what a vaccine passport is. And then he brought one in and said, oh, but it's not a vaccine passport. We're calling it the restrictions exemptions program. It's totally different, though it does exactly the same thing. There are a lot of people who are saying that, but then they look at her and they're like, but she was worse, and she would have been worse. And that is a completely valid argument. I understand that completely. I don't hold that against anybody. We're also, I think Jason Kenney's betting on an economic recovery, which we're seeing. The oil patch is booming. That's, and again, I say Rachel Notley was literally a scarecrow for oil and gas investment. They just decided, you know what? North Dakota's looking pretty good. There's no carbon tax there. No hassle. Trump was in power at the time. Jason Kenney has really turned that around. Is that enough to win confidence of the party? I'm not sure.
Well, and I think that it's sort of transparent with the Senator Manchin visit, where I had the opportunity to ask that question, and his trip literally yesterday to this week to the United States, advocating for oil. If he would have had this level of sort of advocacy, which, I mean, obviously he is a supporter of oil, but he's clearly ramping it up right as this is sort of on the cusp to try and rally support, unify support. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. He's a politician, and it's something good for the Alberta energy sector. But I mean, I think, and like you said, Rachel Notley was criticizing Jason Kenney for not doing enough, for not shutting down things enough, when most people are like, you're destroying society, man. Take the foot off the pedal on this stuff. Particularly the pastor arrests, the attacks on small businesses, and how Albertan are these things. I think the time in Ottawa might have had a bit of an influence, but how Albertan are oil, energy sectors, small businesses, family businesses, mom and pop shops. Those are like the most Albertan things possible, and they all got hit the hardest throughout those restrictions. I think Jason Kenney could have implemented quite a few restrictions, but on very many fronts, he was at the sort of vanguard and he was implementing the strictest restrictions, or he was literally just following suit with Ontario right after they would do things, like immediately after following suit. And what Alberta needed, and we saw it in Saskatchewan, we saw it in some other places, was leadership saying, no, this is too much, or this can help, or we can't. And frankly, that leadership could have been in the form of, we need more restrictions for these extremely vulnerable communities to keep them safe, and we don't need to do this. Like, I think there's opportunities to save lives and to go to bat for the other sort of costs, which there were lives lost as a result of the restrictions. Certainly businesses lost, livelihoods lost, families broken up. So I think failing to strike that balance, if there is a call for a leadership review, and it's successful, and someone else, or there has to be a campaign for the leadership, I think it will be directly as a consequence of that.
Yeah, and there were other ways forward. Jason Kenney, at one point, he was resistant to lockdowns, and then he would go completely the other way. He would apologize. He would lock down the hairdressers and the personal care industry, and then apologize, saying, "I'm sorry I ruined your life," and then go on to lock them down again. Say that he didn't even know what a vaccine passport was. It was such a conspiracy theory.
He said that to me.
To you,
Literally.
and then brings in one of his own, saying this is going to be the best summer ever. We're never going back to restrictions. All you have to do is go out there and get your vaccine, and I promise I'll never close you down again. A lot of Albertans did that because they thought that their premier wasn't lying to them. And then he did. He closed it down again. He brought in a vaccine passport. And I think that flip-flopping really doesn't get you very far with conservatives. The one thing I will say about conservatives, and it's, it makes it hard to win elections, but they don't like to blindly follow a leader. They have a certain set of principles, and if they feel betrayed by their leader, that's it. It's not like liberals where Justin Trudeau wears blackface and they don't seem to have a problem with him now being the anti-racism champion, or he's groping women, but he's also a male feminist, or, he's beating the drum about how other people are unethical and he's Mr. 123 ethics violations. Yeah. And they never call for a leadership review. Conservatives are a little bit more principled, but it makes it hard to win elections.
And, some of those principled conservatives, I want to do this. We're set to go live here any second. Probably, I imagine, given that it's government related, it'll be late. But I do want to talk about a group of people who took a stand, who were among those conservatives who said, no, this isn't right. And if we could jump to this, next week in Calgary, we are going to be doing a screening at Canyon Meadows Cinema, speaking of small businesses that were affected by the lockdowns. But we're going to be heading into this.
Those guys. Support those guys. They believe in free speech.
Yeah. So head down to Canyon Meadows Cinemas for that. But come to the premiere of Trucker Rebellion. This is the incredible sort of inside story. Kean Simone and our own Sid, obviously, we're on location right in there. Mocha and I visited. But all of those people, and Sheila as well, we're all going to be in Calgary next Thursday for the premiere of this film. It's going to be absolutely incredible. You know what? We could talk about it, but why don't we just roll this trailer really quickly? Let's do it.
On January 29th, truckers began a blockade at the Coutts Sweetgrass International border crossing to show support of solidarity with the Freedom Convoy to Ottawa. They, like millions of Canadians, have had enough of vaccine mandates and saw that now was the time to stand. Kean K2 Simone and myself, Sid Fizzard, were embedded within this blockade from the moment we arrived until the very end. On May 26th, we'll be bringing you our exclusive coverage from the inside with our new documentary, Trucker Rebellion, the story of the Coutts blockade.
But the only way I'm leaving is in a cruiser.
To watch Trucker Rebellion, the story of the Coutts blockade, head to truckerdocumentary.com. Not only will you be able to view it there and donate to our independent journalism, you'll also be able to buy tickets for a live viewing in theater as we premiere this exclusive documentary with members of our Rebel team in none other than Calgary, Alberta. You know what the mainstream media said about the truckers. Now, see the truth for yourself.
This is going to be so good. I actually went today to the theater to check it out. It's going to be such a good day. I think we're more than half sold out. I think we sold out our VIP tickets already. That was, you come a bit earlier, we hang out and stuff, but there's still maybe 100, maybe not even. Like, this thing is selling out fast. So go to truckerdocumentary.com, right? I want to make sure I got that right.
Yeah. Or .ca.
Yeah.
I think
.ca, I think we have both. Yeah.
Yeah, we do have both. So truckerdocumentary.ca. Let's sell out and then see if we can organize another showing. I think this is wonderful. I want to support a small business that is cancel culture resistant. This theater is. They are happy and believe in free speech. They want the business and they want the free and liberal exchange of ideas. They don't believe in censorship. So we want to support them. We want to sell out the venue. And we want to see where else we can take this video or this film, because Kian did such an incredible job. He edits our videos all day long. We have a certain rebel style to our videos, but you forget that he's a really, really talented videographer and visual storyteller. Yeah,
it's incredible. And really, like, nowhere else. There's some really good journalism that was done, but no one else was like embedded the entire time. No one else had their trust. Even when I got to Milk River, Mocha went down there. They were like, Kian and Sid said, you guys are you guys are journalists.
You guys are solid.
You guys are all right. So they were so ingrained in there. Incredible stuff. And like I said, a little bit of a meet and greet before. We're even going to have some merch there. So often people in Calgary come up saying, where's that nice shirt? Where do I get that? We're going to have a bunch of that merch on location so you can grab it in person if you don't like ordering online. And then after the movie wraps up, we're going to have a panel. Chad Williamson, who was advising the truckers, is going to be there as well. Truckerlawyer.ca, I think, as well. But incredible stuff. We're so looking forward to that night, having the conversation, getting some popcorn. And they have dirty soda there, which is like, they put like cream and flavors in your pop, and it's ridiculous. I'm very much, I had one today when I was checking out the venue, but I hope to see all of you there. Incredible. It's so important that this story gets told, and it's great. I'm very happy for Kian that this is going to be on the big screen. I think it's his theatrical debut, so that's pretty cool. So very much looking forward to that.
I think the first of many, and a lot of the footage is completely exclusive, as in, I don't care how closely you watched our coverage of Coots, you will not have seen the footage in this movie. You just won't. Kian was there rolling with an eye to perhaps producing a documentary further on down the road. And so this is footage that didn't make it into our reports. Not that it wasn't important enough to get in there, but it was part of a larger narrative that Kian wanted to make sure that the public knew. And the reason we're talking about this right now is because I bet you 99% of the truckers at the Coots blockade were Jason Kenney voters. The farmers probably were, the farmers that came to support the truckers that came against the blockade. They did something when they felt like the courts, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the government, the politicians, the doctors, the Chamber of Commerce, they all failed. And that's when people take matters into their own hands.
Yeah, and that they certainly did. I think very much this sort of the polarization, obviously, with Justin Trudeau being just one of the most ridiculous prime ministers and world leaders. I think overall world leaders are pretty caricaturistic. They have been for a while. But Justin Trudeau is right at the top of that silly totem pole. Very, very sort of troubling stuff we're seeing. And then the juxtaposition of this sort of messianic Jason Kenney return, where he was the principled Harper conservative, who was even a little bit more socially, not that Harper was particularly socially conservative, but he had some social conservatism. So you knew he was going to stick up for churches, and you knew he was going to stick up for businesses and oil. And those were all these things. They're like, yeah, here's our guy. And people were hoping this was going to be long-term, a new Ralph Klein, a new era of sort of boom, and that's not what they got. So I think very often these people who were saying, finally, there's a change, as bad as it is with Justin, we've got at least Jason Kenney. He's going to have our backs. And then he just flipped on them. And I think that is why these truckers, the people who truckers go through so much, they work so hard. They finally thought they had someone who was going to have their backs, who's going to appreciate the West, who's going to appreciate their lifestyles. And right away, they just flip-flopped. And I think they said enough is enough. We thought that this was our last kick at the can through the sort of standard political process. Something has to be done to stand up for our rights and freedoms. We heard very often politicians talking about lawlessness in society. Well, the lawlessness that we witnessed was the charter being trampled. The lawlessness we witnessed was churches being invaded during worship, and I'll use the term invaded during worship. And if they didn't have a pastor, Artur Pawlowski, to ward them off, they interrupted. We saw with Grace Life, they just snooped around and went up and talked during service. Absolutely troubling stuff. We just saw lawlessness, and we saw Jason Kenney at the Sky Palace, which is no doubt a factor in this leadership review, while pastors were being arrested for gathering for worship in public. And this is important with this new court ruling in the Alberta courts. While churches were gathering publicly, which was not subject under a great amount of the health orders, those were only for private gatherings. A judge just ruled that this week. So this private gathering that was excluded to the public would have been subject to orders, and those people should have been charged for violating that health order. Meanwhile, a protest or a church gathering, which I think anyone would argue is very much a public gathering that people are welcome to, at least for a couple months there, it's now confirmed, and that's likely precedent setting, that those health orders never applied to a whole bunch of these tickets. Now, this could very well mean that some of Pastor Archer's charges, which started all of this, some of Pastor Tim Stevens' charges, lots of these charges that came up as a result of orders, we may actually see a bunch of them thrown out based on this precedent-setting ruling. Jason Kenney, however, he was having a private gathering there, work gathering or not, it was certainly private. And there was, on the note of lawlessness, virtually no consequences for him. He said sorry. That's no doubt weighing heavy on the minds of many who voted. I guess the question I have for you, though, Sheila, is how much do you think that level of upsetness, or that level of displeasure with Jason Kenney's conduct, will sway people into sort of an unknown, because they don't know who the next guy or gal up is. They don't know who is going to lead forward. Do you think people are upset enough that they're willing to just say, I'm going to vote against Jason Kenney staying on and continuing as the leader over that? Or do you think they're not willing to risk it?
I think that's where we're at. That's my prediction. I think he's going to get like 55 to 60% in favor. And there's going to be questions and people not confident about the integrity of the vote based on the things that changed with regard to how the voting would happen. And we should really talk about that, because that is a huge thing, a huge shadow hanging over this. And you touched on it a little bit, because there are still RCMP investigations into irregularities from the 2017 vote that swept Jason Kenney into the leadership. There's, that's still under investigation 4 years later. So this thing really should have been, this new leadership review vote, it should have been above reproach, beyond reproach. Completely transparent. Unfortunately, that's not what we're going to see here. And I think Jason Kenney is also counting on the fact that people are sort of hard of remembering when it comes to politics. For example, Jason Kenney is literally, I mean, the gall. He is intervening against the federal government. We have an application here in Alberta to intervene because we think, as a province, the use of the Emergencies Act in Ottawa was unconstitutional. Jason Kenney's been emergency acting. I agree, but Jason Kenney doesn't. Exactly. He's been emergency acting churches all over the place. His Alberta Health Services were going to court to get protests made illegal. And because of that, Chris Scott spent 3 days in jail and was found guilty of contempt of a court order. They basically said, okay, we're not going to declare the Emergencies Act. We're going to go to a liberal, Jason Kenney, but Alberta Health Services friendly judge in Calgary, get this ridiculous court order restricting public gathering and free speech, making protests illegal, calling them illegal public gatherings, and then hauling people off to jail because of them. How is that any different than what Justin Trudeau did to Tamara Lich? It's not.
Yeah. No.
And seizing Chris Scott's assets, locking up his business, seizing the church. This protest where he was arrested, he was protesting the fact that the government had come and seized his small business, chained the doors shut. And so he holds a protest, and then they arrest him. They take his business, and then they take his liberty. And then Jason Kenney has the gall to say, you know what, I think the Emergencies Act is unconstitutional. Give me a break.
Yeah, he's trying to eat his cake and have it too. You don't get to be, and this is it. It's, well, freedom is very popular, and even the Conservative Party of Canada now, they're almost all, other than Charest, some variation of pro-trucker, pro-freedom. It's a very popular sentiment. I think Jason Kenney's issue, it was very easy under a relatively popular Stephen Harper to stand by your convictions. And I think probably Jason Kenney's convictions are these things that he's saying now, and the bad things that he does is him taking advice. But Alberta needs strong leadership. They need Ralph Klein style leadership. And I think once he was under when he was not under Harper's umbrella anymore, and all the flack and all the pressure was coming directly at him, it was no longer the excuse the expression, but sunny ways of, I'm the guy who's going to come save Alberta. And suddenly there were some tough decisions to be made. And with with coming off of 4 years of NDP funding and that sort of ideology, getting into all these bureaucratic agencies of government, there was a lot of pressure. And Jason Kenney, I'm sure he heard, well, if people die, you're going to be on the hook. If this or that or whatever other situation it might be, it's going to be off the hook. Or what about the polling? Right now, all the media is saying that the truckers are bad, and so therefore, or these pastors are bad. So we should just really hammer down on them. And then now, the courts are starting to rule in favor of these pastors, and the federal Conservatives are starting to be in support of the truckers. So that's where we're going to be now, and we're going to challenge on this. Like, you can't waffle like that. And don't get me wrong, if you are by default sort of a windsock politician and you just go with the majority on things, but that's not what people voted for in Jason Kenney. They thought for a change they're getting someone principled. But I do want to get into, because they could start any minute now, the nitty gritty of how this sort of process unfolded, because there was obviously originally they were talking about theoretically doing it in person, and they changed it so many times how they were going to do it. And then eventually what we wound up with was this, like, you have a month to mail in your ballot plus a photocopy of your ID. What was your impression, and what have you been hearing from people about this whole sort of mail-in process and the delays and questions and rescheduling? What are you hearing?
I guess we should tell people exactly what happened here, because it's kind of complicated, but I feel like the party seized upon an opportunity here.
Yeah.
So the leadership review was set to go at an in-person ballot April 9th in Red Deer at the Cambridge Hotel, which is the general UCP Wild Rose Hotel where they hold all of these things. It's the center of the province. And they thought that 3,000 people were coming to cast a ballot in person. They say, and I'm not so sure about this number, but usually 1,000 or so people normally cast a vote at these sorts of things. It's really just your diehards who are sort of invested in this in normal times. But what happened was, at the last minute, the party realized, holy dang, 15,000 people want to vote in this thing. We only have a venue that seats 3,000. Instead of opting to hold, as was being discussed within the party, and I know this for a fact, instead of saying, okay, we have all these people who want to be actively engaged in this process. What's good for democracy is to allow them to be actively engaged in person. The party was considering holding several days of in-person voting in Red Deer, in Edmonton, in Calgary, Fort McMurray, maybe Medicine Hat, Lethbridge, Lloydminster, sort of in spots around the province where people could come and cast their ballot in person because people were really engaged in this. Instead, the party said
community building and really great for conservatives. So can't
also rebuilding trust in the process, because the trust has been shaken given the controversies surrounding the 2017 Jason Kenney leadership vote. Yeah. So the party said it couldn't handle that many people. They moved to mail in, and now up to 59,000 people have the potential to be voting in this thing. I think that's how many ballots they sent out. But in the meantime, Jason Kenney, sort of in between all of this, he's framed the vote as not as a yes or no referendum on whether or not he's done a good job, which is what a normal leadership review is about. Do you have the confidence of the membership? But rather, he said it's a takeover bid by, and these were his words in leaked audio, a takeover bid by fringe extremists and hate peddlers. He referred to the people flooding into the party to make it, like, imagine thinking that 60,000 people are fringe lunatics. I don't think there are that many fringe lunatics anywhere, except maybe Vancouver.
But how many people voted for the NDP?
Exactly. But he's saying this is like a takeover of the party, and not people who are saying, you know what, we want our say in this. He would rather keep this within the carefully managed group of people that he has sort of a iron fist stranglehold on. The certain UCP boards. He referred to them as kooks, lunatics, and insects. That's not a good look, dehumanizing people. And he said they're all angry over restrictions he brought in to try to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. No, they're not angry because of the restrictions. They're angry because they thought they got a guy who said, I'm principled and I will do the tough things when you need me to. And the tough things in this case was to stand up to the health deep state. Instead, he capitulated every time all along the way.
Yeah, that's what he did. And it I think for many, there was a serious sort of sentiment and sense of heartbreak. And I think that using that sort of language, it ultimately is a sense of panic and flailing, and indicating that you can't control 60,000 people. How much have you heard about, I've had a couple emails from people and we've been so swamped, but we will sort of be looking into it. I've heard people, dead family members receiving ballots or several ballots being sent to people. Questions around the sort of validity of that process. Obviously, there's some margin for error, but how much of that have you been hearing, and how much is that part of the narrative?
I've heard a fair bit of that. People saying, like, my mother-in-law died and I'm still getting a party membership. I could vote. I could send in her ID. And I could vote. There's a lot of that now. The party, to their credit, I suppose, has called in an outside auditing firm, Deloitte, to do the counting, which we are still waiting on. And you and I knew that they would be late. We knew. I'm like, oh gosh, get the snacks under the desk. This is going to be an all-nighter. But so they've done their best, I guess, after the fact, to have some sort of, I guess, image of transparency. And we're going to hear more of that in the coming days. I think we're going to hear, as we always do, and I don't know if there's any validity to it, but I guess everything has to be chased down, and everything should probably be investigated as vigorously as they investigate my billboards and books over at Elections Alberta. But it just, the mail-in voting didn't do anybody any favors, and it's just going to break the public trust in all of this. I think the party saw, okay, well, there's a lot of people. Let's seize this opportunity to move to mail-in voting instead of doing the thing that people wanted.
Tiptoeing around, I think we're on YouTube and talking about mailing in stuff. We kind of have to be careful, but I think if there is any sort of lack of transparency or honesty, it wouldn't necessarily be in the counting or the mailing. I think it would be similar to what's being suggested from the last leadership, which was there was like an extremely concerted effort to sell
Bulk buying.
memberships. I believe there was like lots of memberships purchased on 6 cards. Now, sometimes people help out, and bunch of old folks who can't get their credit cards and can't get online, they pool some money, someone puts it on a card. So there are potential explanations for that, but I think if there's ever anything sort of untoward discovered in investigations, it's likely to be that. And the thing with that is some of that stuff is actually not illegal. It may be a little bit unethical, but it's not actually illegal to go out and actively get people saying vote, become a member and vote for this. Now, there's some sort of questions with elections practices as far as if you're paying for those people, you're giving them money, and then asking them to do this. There's sort of thresholds which we'll defer to lawyers to explain. But definitely those are, I think, will be the questions that remain. One of the other sort of things that I've heard frequently, and I think there is some sort of sense to it, is people who are maybe apprehensive, not entirely trusting of the government after what's happened, might be a little bit apprehensive to mail identification.
Sure.
Whether it be identity theft or whatever. And I think that there is potentially a correlation between people who would say Jason Kenney has to go, or it's time for they should race. If he wants to be the leader, he should have to fight for it. And people who aren't comfortable mailing their identification. So I think there might be a little bit of an intersection where that could have affected the votes. But I mean, if it's far easier to sway a room of 3,000 people or 1,000 people than it is to sway 60,000 mail-in votes, because you can easily bring 500 people in, but you can't easily bring in, on the level anyways, 30,000 people to sway a vote. So it's very interesting to see really quickly here, because I guess it could kick off any moment. I've actually heard a couple sort of interesting names coming up. If, let's say, Jason Kenney, the vote comes back and he's no longer the leader for this party, what happens? Does he resign right away? Does he kind of oversee a race and still participate in that race for the leadership? What do you envision happening if he's not successful here?
That's, I guess, for us to see. I mean, Brian Jean, we should talk a little bit about Brian Jean.
Yeah, let's.
But also before we get to that, I just want to say, even if Jason Kenney passes, but it's close, what a vindication this is for the likes of Drew Barnes and Todd Loewen, the MLAs who were ousted from the party for holding the very mainstream view, apparently. The United Party, for holding the view that I suspect very close to 50% of Albertans hold, and that is that Jason Kenney got things wrong. They got thrown out of the party, and they're highly popular in their own ridings. Very popular. And
6:15 is the new reported time, by the way. They just updated it, so 6:15 is the reported results. But I wanted to talk about Loewen and Barnes because, incredibly popular, and they're saying effectively what is being said now. They've been saying that the whole time, kind of like what's that news agency, Rebel News? That's right, they're the guys,
right?
Lots of things they've been saying all along, particularly on live streams. Well, it's very much the mainstream narrative now, or it's at least getting there. So I don't know if he wins, if it's close, if it's tight. What he does, can he reunify by going back to those people and saying I was wrong? Do you think they come back? And what do you make of? I know there's talks of a rural party that focuses exclusively on rural issues, and then it'd be kind of like Bloc Québécois or NDP, where the major parties have to deal with those guys in order to get things done. Do you think that's maybe where we're heading? Because these repeated efforts, time after time, to unify Canadians, whether it be Alliance federally, whether it be United Conservatives, whatever it may be, provincially, Conservatives can't seem to unify. We're just too darn principled on our stances. So do you think that multi-party Conservative approach might be a solution moving forward?
It might be the thing that works to keep the Conservative Party actually conservative, is when they have a party to their right that keeps dragging them right when all the forces of the world are dragging them left, the NDP, the CBC, the federal Liberals, the mainstream media, they're all sort of pulling that party to the left. And over time, it naturally moves to the center and then even to the left, as the old PCs were. But if they have that other gravitational pull on the other side, that might keep them conservative, because if I know politicians, even the unprincipled ones, and there are so many of those, more than anything, they love power. and they love being in charge. And so if you want to be in charge, you have to start making deals with the other party to the right of you. We're seeing the Trudeau Liberals do this right now with the NDP to hold on to power. Yeah. They'll do anything to hang on to power. So I'd rather have a united conservative party be forced to work with a rural conservative party to hang on to power. I'd love that.
Yeah. And you're not likely to see like vote splitting concerns or anything like that. If you're talking about a very conservative rural riding, at most you might see it go UCP or to whatever the rural party might be called. So you're not risking giving a government to the NDP necessarily, but I mean, you are. There are some possibilities technically.
There are smart ways to do this. So you look at the polling and you say, okay, this is a riding that could split and go either way. Yeah. You choose not to run somebody there. Yeah. In the guaranteed sure ridings, you run somebody there. You have a rural caucus, and it's enough to keep the UCP at least on the right track. At least remembering that in Alberta, you need to win by having two of three things. You need the rural seats and either Edmonton or Calgary. And Edmonton is a bit of a wild card District 9 write-off. So you need Calgary and you need the rural ridings if you want to hang on to power. And if the rural ridings split off, like what we saw with the Wild Rose, it's going to scare that federal party, the main conservative party, into working with them.
Yeah, and I think that's what they need to do. I think to your point, and we'll talk about Brian Jean in just 1 second. I just wanted to ask you one last question here, though. Do you think there will be a point? Are we on that cusp? Did maybe COVID-19, as bad as things got, paint a pretty clear picture that conservatives have to be conservative and not kowtow and bow and cave in to liberals in order to succeed? Because for the first time federally as well, this happened when Jason Kenney came in. He kind of blew it. But now we're seeing federally, there is some excitement. There are some candidates who are espousing these values. And it's because they're not trying, like under Andrew Scheer to some extent, and definitely under Erin O'Toole, we saw the Conservative Party trying not to lose. These candidates, I would suggest, at least some of them, despite, maybe not Charest, despite the Built to Win slogan, but even Charest, they're actually sort of sometimes screamingly, but they're declaring what they want to do for Canada. They're not changing their mind and flip-flopping and backtracking. And even Charest, despite it being maybe unpopular, he doesn't support the truckers, and Pierre Poilievre does support the truckers, and this is where we're going. And I think people see that level of principle, and they don't want this caving to Justin Trudeau, caving to Rachel Notley. But do you think conservatives, do you think institutionally they're too ingrained to just try and go along and not lose, or do you think the tide is changing?
I think the tide is changing, and I think the politicians are being dragged into it. Those people that Jason Kenney called kooks and insects and fringe radicals, those were the people in Ottawa that now Pierre Poilievre, Leslyn Lewis, Roman Baber, they are all campaigning. Thank you. I had to stop and think, but I had to pronounce his name. The federal party is campaigning to get the votes of the people that Jason Kenney called radicals. And Jason Kenney, I'm not sure he's figured that out yet. But I do think that there are other people waiting in the wings, maybe one, who has figured that out.
Mr. Jean?
Yeah, I think. And, Brian Jean is an interesting fellow. His story of how he became the Wild Rose leader is really quite incredible. And it has, a lot of people have affection for what he was able to do at great personal cost and sacrifice. For people outside of Alberta, you may not know, but Danielle Smith, who is a broadcaster now here in Alberta, who is sort of fishing around, if this leadership review goes a certain way, she might throw her hat in the ring. But she used to be the leader of the Wild Rose Party here in Alberta, and that was our second conservative party. It was the official opposition. She fractured the party. She basically destroyed it on the verge of an election. She decided that when the PCs finally got a conservative leader again, and after they ousted Alison Redford, she decided, okay, even though we have a party built on grassroots democracy, I'm just going to cross the floor and unite the parties, not give the party membership a say. I'm going to unite the party, and I'm going to take a bunch of MLAs with me.
Yeah.
What she wasn't counting on was that MLAs stayed behind and said, this is not what we signed up for. This is not what I have to answer to in my constituency. We promised the people of this party that they would have a say in what we did with the party. We just can't go and unite it with the PCs after we are the anti-PC party. And Drew Barnes was one of those who stayed behind. Yeah. Man of great integrity. So ultimately, Danielle Smith had to step aside because the backlash was fast and furious. Yeah. And within, I think it was about 35 or 40 days, Brian Jean comes on the scene. He was in Harper's government. He comes back, runs to become the leader of the Wild Rose Party. And literally there were weeks before the election here in Alberta. Weeks. Yeah. He runs to become the leader. His son dies in the middle of the campaign. He takes a few days off, keeps campaigning, wins the leadership, goes into the provincial election, and somehow salvages this hot garbage fire of the Wild Rose Party, gets more seats than the previous Wild Rose Party ever had, and forms a very strong opposition to the NDP, who formed government, and the PCs were relegated to having enough MLAs to sit in a minivan and still go get groceries. And so he's got a lot of affection from the people of Alberta for doing, I mean, just truly the unthinkable. 2015, his first few weeks in office as the leader of the opposition, his house burns down in the Fort McMurray wildfires while he's in Fort McMurray fighting wildfires, helping to organize, supplies and helping people, and his own home burned down. Actually, I think his home burned down while he was in the legislature, and Notley was laughing at him for saying, settle down, we've got this thing covered in Fort McMurray. Well, they didn't have it covered in Fort McMurray. They had cut the Agriculture and Forestry Ministry, which caused them to have to cancel a bunch of water bomber contracts. Those water bombers went to fight fires in other provinces, and there weren't any on the ground here in Alberta. It caused a catastrophe in the north. 1/3 of Fort McMurray burned down, including Brian Jean's home. And so he's got, like I said, a lot of affection for from people here in Alberta. He served his community. He served as the leader of the opposition. He ran for the leadership of the newly united party. He was pro-unity, just like Jason Kenney, but he lost. And then when he lost, people chose Jason Kenney. They thought this big, he was Harper's number 2. He was really, if he hadn't come back to Alberta, he would probably be the leader of the federal party right now. But he came back to liberate Alberta from the NDP, and thankfully he did. But Brian Jean lost, and then he resigned his seat as MLA. Now, some people that left a bad taste in their mouth, for me, I see that as this guy has been through the absolute ringer in the name of public service. Oh, and his mom died in the middle of all that too. And he got married and had a baby. So, take a minute, put your life back together, mourn the loss of your son, your mother, and enjoy your new baby. Great. I get why he resigned. But a lot of people saw him as resigning because he didn't win the leadership. Well, now he's back. He ran when the MLA in Fort McMurray decided to run federally. He said, now's my chance. I see that people want to change from Jason Kenney. He ran for the nomination against a hand-selected Jason Kenney, someone that Jason Kenney had said, this is actually the party's choice in this riding. Brian Jean won the nomination, overwhelmingly won the riding. Now he's going to go to the legislature. And what did he campaign on? He campaigned against Jason Kenney. He was elected as the UCP MLA on a platform of being against the UCP leader. And if this leadership vote doesn't go the right way for Jason Kenney, I think we've got a very frisky couple of months coming up, because we'll have Danielle Smith. I bet we might even see Drew Barnes, maybe Todd Lowen, one of them or both, but probably just one, Jason Kenney. Who knows? We might have, some federal party members, federal MPs do exactly what Jason Kenney did and say, okay, well, you gave it a whirl, I'll give it a whirl too. There's a world of possibilities if
Prominent
this goes
business people
against
even.
it. Yeah.
Elon Musk is going to come and buy Alberta and fix everything.
Threaten me with a good time.
We've got a couple chats now. I don't know if they're ready to go. Should we, let's do that kind of on the fly, if that's okay.
Sure,
yeah. Do a couple chats? Yeah, I may as well.
Sure.
And then again, if it pops up here, should be another couple of minutes, but let's do these chats before we go to the stream.
Sure. And people at home, if you would like to give us your predictions about how you think this is going to go, now's your chance. Put it in a Rumble rant, Super U shout, or an Odyssey hyper chat. Those are the paid chats. We don't take money from Justin Trudeau to keep the lights on. People in the office in Toronto right now are working late. It's 8:00 there, and they're running the stream for us here. So anyway, we'd like to buy them some dinner. We'd like to order them some pizza if you wouldn't mind helping. And
listen, if you guys want to do one of those chats, support our journalism. If you guess the percentage on the yes, no accurately, yes or no, I'll send it, if one person gets it right, I'll send you a shirt of your choosing from the Rebel store. So,
very nice.
Yeah. So we'll do that up until the actual announcement. But if you get a chat in, you're guessing that, I will personally send you a shirt from the Rebel News store. So let's do some of these chats, though.
Okay, we've got Cheryl Dawn V gives us $1. She says, let's write it down. Cheryl Dawn, 47. Cheryl, we might need your shirt size. 47 support for Kenney. He will be O'Tooled. I think we're close. The only way to unite the party and the province will be a new leader. And it better be a great leader, or we are hooped with Notley. Notley her face is around all over the place. Have you noticed that? I try to watch Amazon Prime. I'm trying to watch that new show with the aliens and the cowboys. With Josh Brolin. The name of it escapes me right now.
Or whatever.
Yes, I'm trying to watch that. And I've got to sit through NDP commercial. Yeah, it's okay.
I want to watch it. Yeah. Okay. I'll check it out. It's okay.
It's got my two favorite things, cowboys and aliens, right? So
are you going to go see Nope?
In it.
Nope. Are you going to go see that movie?
I think so. Yep.
Yeah. Sorry, an aside. We'll talk about movies after Jason Kenney. We see what
we're killing time. We're killing time.
Exactly.
I don't think we're fooling anybody here.
No.
But yeah, her face is constantly in my face. I'm trying to watch TV and it's an NDP ad. Yeah. And I think that is going to work against her because it reminds people of just how terrible she was and how bad things were. It was like the province was on a micro lockdown the whole time. Your work was canceled. Nothing was fun. Yeah.
And the other thing too is that like everything she tweets, every ad she runs, even ads run by unions clearly on her behalf, they're all just like malicious attack ads against the Conservatives. But then their own commercials are like, Rachel Notley's running a positive message and talking about positive things. I'm like, literally
against those bastards.
Yeah, exactly. She's a million times more negative than like American politics in all these ads. But they're like, oh, she's just nice and positive. I'm like, no, be nice and positive. Share your good ideas. In fact, when we approach NDP MLAs and ask completely fair questions, answer really well if you believe you have better ideas, and you might win over a couple voters from Rebel News.
Yeah.
But the thing is they don't want to do that. They don't want to engage. They don't want to have real conversations. They don't want to talk about how they'd address these things. They just want to attack and say, we're different. Vote for us. They're bad.
Yeah.
We're loving.
Yeah.
They're
we're
bastards.
loving.
We're great.
Unlike those bastards over there.
Yeah.
Cheryl Dawn V also gives us $1 and says, how can Jean run under the Conservative banner with the goal of unseating Kenney, yet Barnes and Lowen are kicked out for being critical?
Yeah.
It's a good point.
I think that was, they were specifically, it wasn't critical of the leadership. It was the views they espoused were contradictory to the, being careful on YouTube, but the views they espoused were contradictory to the consensus medical opinion of the Chief Medical Officer of Health for Alberta, Dr. Dina Hinshaw. So they were espousing, they weren't just being critical and saying we need to do better, or this is not what my constituents want, which you could argue they were, but I think it was that some of the things they were saying wouldn't have been approved on YouTube. So That's why
Yeah.
they're no longer in the party. But I hope they come back. I don't know if they.
Yeah,
I don't even know if they'd be willing to. But maybe under new leadership, someone else comes in. Maybe it's Jean. Maybe it's someone else. They're like, no, enough is enough. Danielle Smith would be interesting on that front because she is very rural country gal from the sort of high river southern Alberta.
Yeah.
So she does have that sort of. It'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, and I think she might be the person, though she comes with so much baggage. I'm like, you're fine
Yeah.
as a broadcaster. I kind of like you as a person, but boy, bad political judgment. And you know what's weird? All the people around her, she ends up with her political career just scorched, burned right to the ground. She ends up as a broadcaster, brushes herself off and sort of puts her life back together. But the people around her back then, all those guys, I know who you are. And you still have jobs. You still have jobs, don't you? You didn't pay for what you advised her to do.
And to play devil's advocate here, all the polling, if I remember correctly, I was a young man then, but all the polling had the Wild Rose winning. Everyone panicked last minute and flipped. And I think voters had that conservative political sentiment of, well, we don't want to lose. So I think despite everyone, it was going to be Danielle Smith, it was going to be the leader. It was going to be this new, very authentically conservative thing. And I think a bunch of people panicked and went very conservative and went with the status quo instead of bringing in this Wild Rose government. And at that point, in sort of defense of Danielle Smith, and I think that Albertans sort of failed to step up to the plate. Now, she didn't say, no, trust me, we're going to hold the line. Our ideas are best. And she sort of backed away from there, but she was saying everything right. All the indication was that she was going to come in and take the lead. We were finally going to have a real conservative government after all these Redford years. And Albertans were like, the day before. And they're like, I'm just going to vote for the status quo, which is a conservative thing to do. I completely understand it. But for those maybe who don't remember the history of it, it wasn't just a random, just a random, let's bring it together. It was, okay, you don't want us? Well, I guess we'll go with who you voted for. One more, if they would have held the line, probably 4 years later, it would have been Wild Rose, and we probably never would have had an NDP government. Kenney wouldn't have come back, and we wouldn't be having this wonderful live coverage of the leadership review.
Wow.
So everything's meant to be. Everything happens for a reason.
Yeah. I Am Black gives us $5. Kenney is the leader we all wanted. He's not the leader that Alberta needed. I'm not sure Jean is the answer either. I think there's a lot of people in that camp. What a mess bad leadership gets us. No matter who wins the race, Alberta loses. I think you might be right. It's real easy to be the principled guy in good times, but principles matter in the difficult times, in the face of everybody telling you to do the wrong thing. A principled person says, no, I can't. I'm a person of conscience. That's the wrong thing for me to do. That's not what Jason Kenney did, though.
And that clearly being a, I think, Dark Knight reference, very much Alberta needed a Harvey Dent, knight in shining armor. That's what Jason Kenney is meant to be. But after getting clowned by Rachel Notley and company, after getting clowned by progressive activists, we very much got a two-face in Jason Kenney. We got this semblance of a shining knight who behind the scenes was arresting pastors, would say one thing publicly, do another thing altogether different. Do we need that sort of person behind the scenes who's maybe not popular but does what's right? Do we need someone who's a shining knight? Do we need both? It's very interesting. And I mean, I think, I don't know if there is someone out there.
I'm not sure.
Because I mean, Brian Jean, very likable. Generally, I think even people who didn't vote for him were like, well, he's nice, but I think Kenny's the right guy. Very likable. But is he that rock solid, principled guy? I had an opportunity to interview him at the UCP AGM, and when I got into specifics, it was like, we're going to get to that. No, we need someone who's like, this is what we're doing it now, and I don't care what anybody says, because it's the right thing to do. Someone like Danielle Smith with that baggage, with the sort of floor crosser mentality. Brian Jean with very much like, but maybe not the sort of
Maybe not
resilience
the
to
tough cookie. And, like,
yeah.
I think he's a resilient individual.
Oh, 100%.
He can soldier on, but you need
Yeah.
a tough cookie. You need someone
Yeah.
who says to the healthcare deep state, all that garbage you did in the churches, never again. We're going to do a full accounting, a full audit of not only the money we spent fighting COVID, but also a full audit of everybody's actions here. What steps were taken to maintain civil liberties? Did we take the path of least resistance? Did we even work once to try to balance what we thought was a looming healthcare catastrophe with the catastrophe of civil liberties that unfolded at the hands of Alberta Health Services? We need to look at how much money we spent on Alberta Health Services lawyers to drag these pastors to court. All of that stuff. They need to dial back all the power that the healthcare deep state has. They need someone who is willing to take on the public sector unions, who basically ran the show. They were the ones saying, lock down the kids, cancel all the stuff, wear the masks in school. They're the ones saying, empty out the hospitals, give us a pandemic raise, even though the hospitals are empty because we canceled all the elective surgeries. And now people are dying because they didn't have healthcare diagnosis that would have caught their cancers earlier. Who's going to be held accountable for that? The next UCP leader, whether it's Jason Kenney who survives this or somebody else, that person has to be strong enough to say, we got this wrong, people died, we ruined lives, and somebody needs to be held accountable every step of the way, even if it is the UCP.
Well, listen, we saw these pastors, and Chris Scott among others, but pastors particularly, 51 days for Pastor Artur Pawlowski, and that wasn't even his first incarceration. Numerous dramatic arrests. Pastor Tim Stevens' his church building locked up. He was arrested, released, rearrested. That what we've seen here is so egregious. And now with some of these rulings we're seeing, it's very evident that these health orders very likely didn't even apply. So these people were categorically wrongly imprisoned. The ruling in Calgary basically determined it was going to be 2 days of court proceedings for this protest organizer. And they didn't even get to the second day because the judge said, well, he didn't break the law in the first place. We don't need to talk about constitutional things because he didn't break the law in the first place. We are going to inevitably see, especially, and for a long time I was doubtful, but now that we're seeing the courts start to come around, civil liberties organizations, literally ACLU, not to mention, but Canadian Civil Liberties Organization, rather. Finally getting involved, but organizations like the Democracy Fund obviously doing incredible work, Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, but the courts are like, ooh, maybe we were overreacting. Even Sarah Miller, JSS Barristers, very prominent professional, like mainstream lawyer, not an activist, just a good lawyer.
No, just a good lady. Yep.
Just a good lawyer. She commented overtly, and Chad Williamson as well. These are people who aren't likely to criticize the courts if it isn't something that can clearly be evidenced and founded. And they've commented that we've gone from the court punishing people because they disagreed with their position, which we saw in this dramatic arrest footage that we're seeing of Pastor Artur Pawlowski. We're going from that position to the courts actually upholding the law, even if they don't like the person that didn't necessarily break the law, but they're not punishing ideologically. So there's going to be some church buildings probably purchased for some of these organizations who endured months of incarceration by this government, by these governments who punished them unjustly. There's going to very likely be legal action as a result of what we've seen these past 2 years, for years and years to come. And very much this province needs a leader who is going to take the lead on that front and is going to not just wait for repercussions, but actively go out and say, we need to address this problem because the government went way overboard. I know government doesn't like wearing egg on their face. We know that the reason we're seeing so many delays with court proceedings and things getting bumped, and they're very gradually dropping charges here and there to try and avoid getting egg on their face. We can't forget what happened, and we can't forget that there needs to be some form of justice moving forward, whatever that looks like, done through the courts legally and properly. That remains to be seen really quickly, and by all means weigh in on this. I just want to give, again, a massive shout out to our team in Toronto. I literally say, talking to Brian Jean, and they have it up in seconds.
Like that.
I think it's Efron and Olivia working today. Absolutely incredible work. Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate it. Can't wait to grab you a za or a beer or something next time we get together when there's a new government in, hopefully, and we're allowed to.
Yeah, that's right. Viewers at home, if you're watching and if you want to pitch into the beer and pizza fund for Efron and Olivia, who are now, it's almost 8:30 where they are working to keep the stream up while we deal with the inevitable delays of every leadership election and or review. Send us that in the form of a Rumble rant, an Odyssey hyper chat, and a super you shout. Those are the paid chats. We'll read your comments on air. And if you have a guess about how you think the leadership review is going to go, send it to us that way too. And Adam said that he will buy a t-shirt for the person who gets the number right. So good luck to you.
Sorry, Efron said one thing there I just couldn't quite sorry, not sure. We are now. We have another
delayed
update.
Until 6:30.
6:30.
I knew it. I knew it.
You know what? Why don't we talk about, because we have until 6:30. We have some incredible coverage. Just the other day, someone on Twitter was like, "Why aren't you talking about Davos? Why aren't you talking about the World Economic Forum? All of this stuff." Well, you know what? We actually.
Do you know what? By the way.
Yeah.
You were
the first.
I was the first. And I want to tell you that this is very near and dear to my heart, because you know who screwed me out of a trip to Davos? Dina Hinshaw. That's who did, because one of the churches that is being helped through the Democracy Fund's Fight the Fines initiative, because Alberta Health Services barged into the church as the church was in service, tried to speak to Pastor Rodney when he was on the pulpit, Church in the Vine. They were found guilty last week or 2 weeks ago of obstructing a public health officer, and they are anticipated to get hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines. And they get their sanctions delivered to them on May 25th. And that is when I would have been with the rebel team in Davos, Switzerland. My flight was booked. The Airbnb was booked. I had dug the luggage out of the sea can. I was ready to go. And nope. Dina Hinshaw ruins another thing for me. Anyways, go on. You were telling, that's me being disgruntled, but tell everybody what we're doing in Davos.
Obviously, Sheila would have been
I'm too mad to talk about it.
Sheila would have been the best there, obviously, but we do have a team, sort of an incredible team. Are we even allowed to say who's all there yet? Is that, I think we sent an email.
It's an international team.
We'll leave it at that. We'll have some mystery. An international team is going to be covering all of the action like nobody else. There's maybe some well-known figures from some other organizations. Don't want to give away too much, but an incredible A-list superstar team is headed to Davos. Some of them maybe are already there. Who knows? But we're going to be covering this. We're going to be bringing you this story, covering it like absolutely nobody else, and also telling the other side of the story, asking the tough questions. But that's not the only coverage of this we're doing. And if you want to say more on that, by all means, what's our URL for that again? That is wefreports.com. People are going to see independent journalism from the inside of Davos that you won't see anywhere else, where these globalist elites are telling you how to live your life, what size of car you should drive, that you should live in a pod and eat bugs and ride a bike everywhere. And we are going to catch them driving around in their SUVs, staying in their big, huge, enormous penthouses that are bigger than your house, and eating in the steakhouses while you're supposed to eat human slop. We're going to catch all their hypocrisy while we're there, and maybe even put some questions to these weirdos. And you know what? This has been in the works for a long time. Obviously, we've been lining everything up, so this isn't an impromptu thing. But this isn't the only coverage we are doing. We also have coverage, a docu-series coming out again by Kian Simone, doing some incredible work alongside Louis Brackwell at exposethereset.com. That docu-series is breaking down so much of this craziness, some of Klaus Schwab's background. It's a really deep dive on the story that so many people are interested in. And I think it's really good because it's really sort of bona fide, credible journalism. You're not going to get caught up in some of the stuff out there that might be misinformation information or disinformation. This is sort of very factual. It's very
It's
polished.
bad enough. It's bad enough without the
It's
embellishment.
bad enough you don't need to twist it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So incredible stuff. So I think we have a trailer for that as well. So let's check out that trailer while we're waiting here.
The effect will be much similar to World War, and actually all countries in the world are affected.
We can reshape the world in ways we couldn't before, ways that better address so many of the challenges we face. And that's why so many are calling for a great reset.
Millions of Americans staying at home are relying on Amazon.
Millions of Americans staying at home are relying on Amazon.
You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. It's a phrase you've probably heard over the last couple of years. But what exactly does it mean?
I can't wait.
Yeah.
I've seen it all, and I've seen it all. I helped with the scripts, and it doesn't matter. I'm still excited.
Oh, I'm so excited. You know, I honestly, the sort of final ready to go version of the trucker documentary has been sitting there. I haven't watched it. I'm waiting for the theater.
You're gonna love it. It's
myself.
so good.
Yeah, I love going to the movies, so I'm waiting for the full experience. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing all of you there. I'm obviously, Sheila and I are going to be there for that trucker video as well. So Kian's doing some incredible work. Very much looking forward to sharing that with all of you.
I'm so proud of the team that was there too. I remember when you guys were there, and Kian was there, and Sid was there, and they were living out of their car at one point, and then they were sleeping on the floor of an office, because where do you sleep in Coots at the border? And you guys were in Milk River, sort of where the police had cordoned off all the supporters. And I just remember being so proud of the work you guys were doing. And it all just flooded right back when I was watching. And I'm like, oh, look at that. I'm so proud of, like, you guys owned the story from beginning to end. And we continue to own the story because you guys are really the only ones trusted to be there to get the story right.
And the other thing too is, I mean, it just boils down to doing hard work and doing real journalism. Sometimes journalism is not glamorous. And we saw some of the mainstream media outlets, frankly, they hung it at their hotels. They'd get a call from someone clearly in the police and roll up when something was going to happen. We could literally watch them pull up, and then there'd be a police thing or there'd be something. Despite talking to the police, very often they wouldn't always relay that information to us. But we were there. There was literally days where I was on the ground at the border for 20 hours, just 20 hours, just staying there. So if anything happened, we would be there.
The guys slept in their cars. I was like, how do I get clean socks to them? I just, they went down there and they thought, okay, well, they went down there one evening. It was a terrible snowstorm. And I thought, okay, they're going to be there overnight. The RCMP are going to come move out everybody, and that'll be the end of it. Yeah. And it was weeks later. Yeah. And I was like, how do I potato cannon some clean socks over the police lines to these guys? How do I help them?
Rebel copter it in. Who knows? How do you get stuff into these? How do you get stuff in?
Who knows?
But so really incredible stuff. Again, we are set. They haven't updated here. They are saying that this is set to go at 6:30. A couple more of these chats have come in. Do you want to do those as we wait for this to theoretically start?
Sure. We've got one from Cat Barks 68, gives us $1 and says 49%. Thanks for covering this. I assume that's 49% for Kenny. We've got Taking Back Our Freedoms, gives us $2, says need a public inquiry, especially to focus on decision-making of Alberta Health Services and the College of Physicians. Yeah, that's the other bad guy in all of this, is the College of Physicians and Surgeons, who bullied doctors into not writing exemptions, bullied other doctors into silence upon threat of destroying their careers. If a doctor spoke out against I got to dance around this, an injury related to a medicine administered to somebody over the course of the last 2 years, one of those government mandated medicines. If a doctor spoke out and tried to advocate on behalf of his patient, which is what you want a good doctor to do, he was threatened with losing his license, losing his career, the inability to practice. But as it turns out, those doctors were early adopters of good ideas, and they seem to have been right all along.
Well, and the one story that just broke my heart is I went out and spoke to this family, and this girl had missed out on weeks of school. And I think this is okay to talk about, but it was their story. So they finished much of the school year. Everything was fine. She has a series of sensory issues where she has to like change her clothes seven times before leaving to make sure everything feels right. So she cannot wear a mask while attending school. So as the year ended, I can't remember if it was 2020, 2020. I think it was 2021. It must have been, yeah. So as 2021 ended, right when 2022 came along, she went back after Christmas break, and they said, "Oh, your doctor's note's not valid." Oh, here we go. We're going to the reactions. We'll talk about this after, but
okay. Yeah.
This live stream and the continuation of our 2022 United Conservative Association Special General Meeting. As I mentioned when we gathered in April, this meeting is being held according to the rules and procedures established by the elected Board of Directors pursuant to Article 13.1 of our United Conservative Association bylaw. Those rules set out the agenda for the meeting, and there will be no amendments to the agenda. The only item of business today that remains to be carried out is the announcement of the leadership review results. This has been an extraordinary effort on behalf of the members of our party. I would suggest that no process in Alberta's history has had more discussion, more input, or more scrutiny than this review of our leader. There has been much conversation about the integrity of this process. Our members, and in fact Albertans, wanted us to have a credible process, and we delivered. We are bringing civility back to the political process. Before we get to the results, it's important to talk about what was involved. Tens of thousands of Albertans signed up to take part. Our UCP membership more than doubled. The mail-in ballot allowed every eligible member to choose to have their say. Members were given the opportunity to make sure that their information was accurate. We had an internal process to ensure that all membership applications received met the requirements outlined in our bylaws, which were created by our UCP members at a general meeting. Ballots were sent from a third-party mailing house to all those eligible. We worked with Canada Post from the beginning to ensure their timely delivery. Our party staff spent thousands of hours responding to calls and emails assisting our members. Videos were posted on our website explaining the process in detail. We were open and transparent and answered all queries from our membership and the media. We sat down with some of our harshest critics and shared information to address their concerns. As a result, record numbers of our members have participated in this leadership review, more than any other party in Canada. The engagement of our members has been extraordinary. Thank you to everyone who participated. It's through your commitment that we have such a strong process. The UCP, along with our amazing, incredibly engaged volunteers, has worked diligently to maintain the security of this vote. Each ballot package was received in Deloitte's secure facility. ID was verified and checked against our membership list. We can attest that only one ballot per eligible member was counted. The ballots have been kept in secure sealed ballot boxes until the count today. Both the verification process and the count were observed by our many constituency association scrutineers, returning officers, and Deloitte. Over 14,000 Albertans tuned into our live stream to observe the process. I would like to thank Doreen Hume and her team from Deloitte LLP for stepping forward to advise us and be an independent observer of our processes. Deloitte was appointed to monitor the mail-in voting process and verify the leadership review results. They have done a tremendous job. Our Chief Returning Officer, Rick Orman, and his Deputy Returning Officers worked every step of the way to ensure a secure process. Thank you to them for their wisdom, experience, and civility. Over 200 party volunteers gave of their time to carry out the ID verification and the count. scrutineers from constituencies across the province and from both sides of this issue were in the room at all times to observe. We couldn't have done it without these remarkable folks. Thank you to all. Whatever the results, we need to focus on being the united Conservative Party. Tomorrow is the start of the 2023 election campaign. We have a lot of work to do, and we need to do that together as a team. I will now ask Rick Orman, our Chief Returning Officer, to give you the results.
Thank you, Cynthia. Good evening, everybody. Our party's leadership review and selection rules set out that the question in a leadership review shall be, quote, do you approve of the current leader, unquote. Members were given the option to vote yes or no. Those same rules require we announce the number of votes cast for and against the question, as well as the total numbers for the vote. So here are those numbers. I can advise that there were 34,298 votes cast. There were 17,638 yes votes and 16,660 no votes. These numbers represent 51.4% yes and 48.6% no.
Thank you, Rick. Because the leader received more than 50% of the votes cast in support of his leadership, a leadership election will not be automatically triggered by the leadership review vote. That completes our business for today. Thank you again for attending. I now declare the 2022 United Conservative Association Special General Meeting officially adjourned. Before we hear from Premier Kenney, I'd like to speak about our leaders' commitment to the leadership review process. Over the last several weeks, Premier Kenney has crisscrossed the province to meet with many of our nearly 60,000 members. Since January, he has done more than 100 events, telephone town halls, coffee meetings, fundraisers, and phone calls with members from as far north as Lacrete all the way down to Medicine Hat. At every turn, he has reinforced the vision upon which our party was founded, a broad-based, mainstream political party where Conservatives of all persuasions can come together to build a stronger movement and a better province. He has seen this leadership review process as an opportunity to reinvigorate our party and to assert how UCP policies have helped create the huge momentum we are seeing in Alberta today. I'm confident we will ride that momentum into the next election, where Albertans will reward us for a job well done and once again put the trust in our party. And now, I'd like to go to Calgary, where we will hear from our leader, Jason Kenney.
Well, I am not surprised by that. I think that's actually what I said right off the top. I said I thought he would pass by the skin of his teeth. I'm going to need a t-shirt. I wear a size small out of the store. And not even the ladies' cut. I'm sort of a unisex build.
Thank you.
This sounds like Kenny.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here, and to thousands of folks joining us right across the province online. Friends, tonight the members of our party completed a democratic exercise in accountability. The result is not what I hoped for, or frankly what I expected. But I've been clear from day one that I will respect the decision of the members in this leadership review. And I expect all members of our party to do just that. Friends, while 51% of the vote passes the constitutional threshold of a majority, it clearly is not adequate support to continue on as leader. And that is why tonight I've informed the president of the party of my intention to step down as leader of the United Conservative Party. I'm sorry, but friends, I truly believe that we need to move forward united. We need to put the past behind us. And our members, a large number of our members, have asked for an opportunity to clear the air through a leadership election. And I've recommended, therefore, that the provincial board schedule a leadership election in a timely fashion. I want to thank all members who participated in this process and the hundreds of volunteers who have pitched in. I also want to thank so many of you here and right across the province for your support and the tireless efforts of those who have had confidence in my continued leadership. Friends, it's clear that the past 2 years were deeply divisive for our province, our party, and our caucus. But it is my fervent hope that in the months to come, we all move on past the division of COVID. And disappointing as this result is for me, I am incredibly proud of the work that this team has done. Together, we reunited the free enterprise movement in Alberta politics, and we won the largest electoral mandate in our province's history. We inherited profound fiscal and economic challenges, and then we went through 3 once-in-a-century crises, the largest public health crisis in a century, the largest collapse of the world economy in nearly a century, and the first time ever we experienced negative oil prices. And yet, despite all of that, we got the job done, delivering on nearly 90% of our election commitments while turning around our economy. While turning around the economy, so we're leading Canada in economic and job growth, balancing the budget for the first time in 14 years, and paving the path towards a new era of diversification, putting parents back in charge of education, passing the Choice in Education Act, and so much more. By the way, did you hear last week, we won an historic victory against Justin Trudeau's No More Pipelines law. And just yesterday, I was with members of our team in Washington fighting for Alberta energy jobs and winning the support of some of America's key leaders. We continue to get the job done as a team. But clearly, a large number of our members want to clear the air with a leadership election. And I fully respect their decision, and I encourage all members to do the same. While we have our internal differences, we must remember the shared values that unite us as Conservatives. And we must always remember the promise of Alberta, this great land of opportunity where dreams come true and anyone can achieve their God-given potential. So thank you so much for your presence. Now, let's get on with the real show tonight, the Battle of Alberta. As Daryl Sutter said yesterday, it's bringing our province together. It's the best thing ever. I couldn't agree more. God bless you all, and God bless the province of Alberta. Thank you so much.
Holy heck.
Yeah. That I don't know how many people were expecting that. I have to say that it seems like a principled thing to do. 51.
You know
Yeah.
Good for him. That is exactly, he changed the rule so that it would be 50% plus 1. And for him, that's his own rules weren't good enough, as in the support for his leadership wasn't high enough. And to save the party, to stop the division, he stepped down. And that might be the most principled thing I've seen him do in the last 18 months. I'm shocked. He handled that with extreme dignity. Mm-hmm. I'm stunned. Yeah. I can't believe I just watched that.
Yeah, I'm in a state of disbelief. And you know who else is stunned right now? Rachel Notley. That moment will be replayed and reflected on throughout this moving forward. Whoever is leading the UCP, the fact that he talked about the division and the hardships and acknowledged that, and ultimately we talked about politicians being accountable. We talked about politicians saying, I messed up. He didn't overtly say that, but he said it's been divisive, it's been problematic, we've done okay economically, there are issues. And then for him to say 51% is just simply not enough. And so I am stepping down because the party needs to move forward. I think this is quite possibly, other than him receiving a 75% pass and us being way off the mark, this is the only way, very likely, that the UCP is going to beat the NDP in the next election.
Yeah.
I think this
because I don't think the party is unpopular. I don't think the party itself is unpopular. I think he's highly unpopular with party membership and conservatives in general, because he didn't govern from the right so frequently. Remember, one of the first things he did, he talked about the negative oil prices that we experienced here in Alberta. One of the first things he did was put production caps on, which is a very Venezuelan thing to do. It shocked people. It put people out of work nearly instantly to artificially inflate the price of oil. And that was long before the COVID crisis or the COVID lockdown at the hands of politicians crisis. That was our first clue that when, when things got trying, that maybe he would waver, and he did. But I'm stunned at what I just saw. But as you say, this is probably the only way forward. And I know that Danielle Smith has a press conference tomorrow. And Adam, as Jason Kenney was talking, I just sent you the information.
I was going to do something else tomorrow, but I will be on that. I'm going to do that instead. So yeah, this is, and for a politician, we were just saying, like, I don't know if someone else is the guy. I think it was pretty apparent at this point, and that vote showed it, even with all these allegations of efforts to skew the vote, for it to be this close, whether those were legitimate otherwise, for it to be this close, it was pretty apparent for Jason Kenney and for everyone watching that Jason Kenney was not the guy either. But to have a politician say that, so not, I'm going to think about it and we're going to talk about it tomorrow, but to come out and just say, you know what, this isn't good enough, I'm not the guy, we need to beat the NDP. That's about as principled a conservative thing as I have seen out of this government in some time. What I'm hoping for is the next, whoever it may be, that is leading this province moving forward. Hopefully they win the next election, because we can't deal with 4 more years of Notley, but whoever takes charge, hopefully they take a note, they take something, a page out of the book from the folks in the federal leadership race presently, and they're actually willing to speak to these issues and say, hey, the person who was preventing someone from interrupting church services, guess what? They were preventing someone from committing a 2762 criminal code crime, and they're actually not guilty anymore. And we're going to stop persecuting and targeting people who stood up for themselves. We need someone who is willing to say, obviously, in whatever political speak they need to use to be careful, but that the truckers weren't the bad guys and that the government overstepped. Because I think if we get, and I'm not sure if Danielle Smith and I'm not sure if Brian Jean are the people to do that, but if we get more of the same, Jason Kenney stepping down means nothing. If we get a new principled style of leadership, Jason Kenney was in on this narrative so hard. I don't think he thought he could just erase it and say, we were wrong, we're moving on. I think he knew the party needed a new, fresh start. And hopefully that new, fresh start comes. Hopefully it isn't just more of the same. And maybe we get some surprises. Maybe some of the voices that come to the forefront aren't those we've been thinking of, but we will certainly be there, whether it's Danielle Smith, Brian Jean, whoever else, to get that side of the story. We'll certainly reach out to Jason Kenney as well. Hopefully have an interview with him about this decision, about his perspective, and about what he thinks is going to happen moving forward. But yeah, this is big. This is shocking. This is surprising. It'll be interesting to see the repercussions among people who've been closely knit. There are people, Tyler Shandro, Jason Copping, to name a few, who are very closely associated with and identified with Jason Kenney. What happens with them? Are they part of the new government moving forward? Are they done as well because of their close association with what has clearly been a damaging legacy for the UCP? That all remains to be seen, but no doubt ripples through the Conservative community in Alberta tonight.
Yeah, it's interesting to see who will now throw their name in the hat. We have some Conservative MPs federally who lost their seats because of Andrew Scheer and Aaron O'Toole's vote split. Are they going to throw their hat in the ring?
Yeah.
A couple of them don't have pensions. Are we going to see someone who's outside provincial politics come in? Or are we going to see somebody emerge from within the party? It's going to be a very interesting, I think, week. I think a lot of people who were Conservative insiders may have already seen this coming. I knew he would pass. I knew deeply that he would pass. I just didn't think that he would resign afterwards. It sort of caught me off guard. I'm still sort of stunned. And I guess also, what does Jason Kenney do now? I always thought that Alberta was a stepping stone back to federal politics for him. It still could be. But Pierre Poilievre is highly popular for embracing the people that Jason Kenney wanted to jettison from the party. So I don't know what goes on here. Does he resign as MLA? He didn't say that. So, I think whoever is the new leader, they are going to need some sort of an elder statesman. Is that going to be Jason Kenney? I don't know. What's Stephen Harper doing, by the way? Where's he? Get him out of retirement. Tell him to take off his cardigan, put the foster chinchillas down, and maybe he can come back and make sure that we don't have an NDP premier one more time.
Or maybe, just maybe, someone comes out who never went to Ottawa. They've always been Albertan. They're
Paul Brandt.
True, heart in the West. I think maybe we need to stop. And I think part of the problem throughout COVID-19 restrictions is we were very much a little kid looking up to Big Brother Ontario. I think we need someone who understands that Alberta's actually the mom and dad in Canada. We've been paying the bill for a long time. We don't need to look to them. And in fact, if you want to continue getting your allowance, you're going to have to start doing your chores. I think we need someone like that who isn't because why is it such a foreign concept that the leader of Alberta is entirely focused on Alberta's interests? Obviously within the Commonwealth and obviously in cooperation with other places, but I think we need someone who's unapologetically not Ottawa based, not Ottawa oriented. I think that's what Alberta needs, and I don't know who that person is. Don't get me wrong, Brian Jean, Danielle Smith, they are very Alberta born, Alberta bound folks. Maybe it's them, but maybe it's someone we're not thinking of. I for one can't wait to see the first UCP leadership debates. Will be there, of course, when and who those names are, who we're actually talking about, because we could be talking about completely different front runners, completely different conversations. And given that it's, I think, May 29th, 2023 is the next scheduled election provincially, we're talking about a tight deadline. We're going to be very likely covering federal and provincial leadership content at the same time. So Sheila,
this is so exhausting.
Have a nap. Make sure you stock up on some coffee, and let's get ready because it's time to rock and roll.
It's perpetual electioneering. We went from federal election to Conservative Party leadership election. Ontario's in election. Somewhere in between there, there are other elections.
Australian elections.
Australian election. I missed the Saskatchewan election that was not all that long ago. Now we're going into leadership election here in Alberta, and then we'll roll right on into campaigning, because they'll campaign way in advance of the writ being dropped here in Alberta. So it's going to be a summer of campaigning. I imagine they're going to want to get this sort of fixed and rebuild the confidence of Albertans within the party right away. So you know what? Dina Hinshaw screwed me out of Davos, but I'm not mad at this point because it's going to be an interesting week.
I wonder if they'll have the actual vote for the leadership in person. I wonder if they've been listening at all. I honestly think that might be the metric if the party's actually changed. if they realize that this whole mail-in thing was a missed opportunity. Like, imagine if Donald Trump was here running. We can have in-person things. I'm going to talk at every single bloody one, and we're going to have massive concert venues, and it's going to be incredible. I think the next leadership debates, and when the actual vote comes around for the leadership, if they do this same mail-in month-long, absolutely anticlimactic, boring thing, I think we're dealing with the same old UCP, and the NDP wins the next election. If they capitalize, if they become alert and aware, if they realize they need to give back to the community and be transparent, have in-person voting, multiple locations across Alberta, that's an opportunity any party should be chomping at the bit for. If that happens, I think the NDP is in trouble.
Yes. You know, we should wrap up. We should wrap up some of these chats. We've got a few left on the board, and then we'll get off the stream here because it's almost 9 o'clock in Ontario, and David Menzies and I can reconvene this conversation tomorrow on the live stream at 10 a.m. Alberta time, noon Eastern, and we'll have a lot to say. We might even see over the course of the evening here people already announcing their leadership bids. Oh my goodness, I'm never going to sleep again. I'm just realizing how much work this whole summer leading into next summer is going to be. This is it. This is our job, Adam. This is what we do. Yep. So forever. Politics is never changing, and they say that politics can be boring, but I never get that sense. No. Let's get into some of these. So we've got Taking Back Our Freedoms gives us $2. Todd Lowen and Peter Guthrie are both excellent leaders. I'm also very curious about Rob Anderson, great Alberta First platform. Is that Rob Anderson, the former Wild Rose floor crosser Rob Anderson? I'm not sure. Or are we talking about Rob Anders? But you wrote Anderson, so I hope it's not Anderson.
But yeah,
is it Anderson? I don't know. If it's Anderson, who was a Wild Rose MLA who crossed the floor, I don't know. Go back into obscurity. Fraser McBurney, our friend Fraser, says $5, hopefully 34% for Kenney and 66 to rid Alberta of Kenney. Well, you got what you wanted, but you got the numbers wrong. I don't think we had anybody who nailed the numbers. It's me. I'm getting a T-shirt.
Yeah. One person did say 49, but it was the other way. So
yeah. Yep. It's a good thing I like T-shirts. Cheryl Dawn V gives us $1. I think the longer it takes, the results, the poorer for Kenney. He will drag it out to interfere and hide behind the Battle of Alberta hockey playoffs. Well, you got some of that right. He did mention the Battle of Alberta and the playoffs tonight. But I can't believe how dignified. You know what? I shouldn't say that. Even when he's at his worst, he acts with the air of dignity. Mm-hmm. You know, when he's in public, behind closed doors, maybe he says some things about Albertans that he definitely should not be saying, but surprisingly dignified and good-natured, and it seemed pretty actually selfless. That was my impression there, and good for him.
It will be interesting
go out on a high note.
It will be interesting to see how, and I mean, he's probably going to pretty quietly, dignified go off on his way and let the UCP do their thing. It'll be interesting down the line, though, to see his sort of willingness to talk openly and share his opinions, and maybe not talk about some of this stuff specifically, but get back to being Jason Kenney that we've known from the past. Interesting to see, certainly.
Oh my God, Adam, he can run for the mayor of Calgary next time. There's a lot of possibilities all of a sudden. Just lateral moves, shuffling people around, who knows? Cheryl Dawn V gives us $1. Okay, that's the same one. Then that's me sending Adam a note. Then Annalisa 1964 gives us $10 and says, WTF, I'm gobsmacked. I am literally gobsmacked too. I'm not thinking clearly.
We can clip when he said that, and the shot is literally of Sheila and I gobsmacked, which has never happened in history. We're never gobsmacked. We always have 15 things to say, and we're trying to keep up with them. But
I was sort of responding to messages and watching the things that are happening in the office, and I just heard out of the corner of my ear, I'm stepping down, and I'm like, I'm shocked. I'm still shocked. I literally cannot think clearly. I'm going to be up all night. I'm going to be prowling around the house, deep in thoughts. Cheryl Dawn V gives us $1. Those 4,000 memberships bought on 8 credit cards. Yes, that's what it was. Were well worth it for Kenney. I'm not so sure. I am black.
Maybe Fraser McBurney's percentages were actually correct.
Could be. I am black gives us $5. Stepping aside was the right thing. I agree too. It's time.
Yeah.
It's the only way to move forward, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I had such high hopes for Jason Kenney. I had high hopes. I really did. But when he was tested, he failed time and time again. I don't believe taking a victory lap was a good look. I hope this is the first step forward to keeping the NDP out. From your lips to God's ears.
Yeah.
Do I have a Jason Kenney book in me? I might. Taking back our freedoms gives us $1. Alberta First and Freedom Movement can now activate in massive numbers and take over the UCP. Let's do it. I'm just reading the chats. I'm not giving advice. Fraser McBurney gives us $5. Boy, my guess was wrong, but the results were what I wanted. We rid Alberta of Kenney. Herbster 983 $10. Good job to both of you. Thanks for doing this. From Herbert Hildebrandt. Oh, hi Herbert. How's it going? You're in the middle of a leadership, well, not a leadership, a provincial election there, and I see that your premier wants everybody to be hard of remembering, and he's just the gosh darn it, what did you want me to do? I was just listening to the health officers. I'm just a politician. You know, like it's goofy to watch.
Elected to lead, not to read.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a goofy guy. I think that's it. It's 7:02 here in Alberta. I'm still shocked. I think you are still shocked too. I can't believe what I witnessed. But after 2 years of doing the wrong thing, I think Jason Kenney finally did the right thing.
And perhaps it is an omen for the Battle of Alberta, which Calgary is clearly going to win. Yeah.
Efron informs me that we have Kian's documentary trailer for Coots. So you'll see more of, instead of just the promo, which we showed you earlier, it's the full trailer, the big full trailer. It's beautiful. It's great. He worked really hard on it. I want to thank everybody for tuning in, everybody who pitched in to put the show together behind the scenes in the office, Olivia and Efron and the web team who stayed late to make sure that everything was up and running for everybody. Adam, thanks for co-piloting with me on this very shocking result. Yeah. And the results weren't shocking. Just what Kenney did. I mean, my socks are across the room. He blew them right off. And thank you to everybody again who pitched in to support the work that we do here completely willingly. We know there are lots of places where you can spend your money and there is less of it in your pocket than ever, but you chose us and we definitely appreciate that. If you want to get more gobsmacked reactions from me, tune in tomorrow at 10 Mountain Time, where I am joined by David Menzies. And hopefully we'll try to unpack and digest tonight's news and anything else that breaks along the way, because I'm sure it will. I've charged your phone, Sheila. It's going to get crazy. So I guess that's it. As David Menzies always says, stay sane.
On January 29th, truckers began a blockade at the Coots Sweetgrass International border crossing to show support of solidarity with the Freedom Convoy to Ottawa. They, like millions of Canadians, have had enough of vaccine mandates and saw that now was the time to stand. Kian K2 Simone and myself, Sid Fizzard, were embedded within this blockade from the moment we arrived until the very end. On May 26th, we'll be bringing you our exclusive coverage from the inside with our new documentary, Trucker Rebellion, the story of the Coots blockade.
But the only way I'm leading is in a cruiser.
To watch Trucker Rebellion, the story of the Coots blockade, head to truckerdocumentary.com. Not only will you be able to view it there and donate to our independent journalism, you'll also be able to buy tickets for a live viewing in theater as we premiere this exclusive documentary with members of our Rebel team in none other than Calgary, Alberta. You know what the mainstream media said about the truckers. Now, see the truth for yourself.